In Paris, a professional hitman only known as the Killer has spent hours looking out a window in an old room, waiting for his target to show up at the hotel across the street. He only leaves his chair to go to drink water and exercise. One afternoon, the Killer leaves the building to get food. He pretends to be a German tourist because the French always avoid those people. After making sure his scooter is still in place, the Killer gets some food from McDonald's and calls his handler Eddie. It's been 5 days and he's tired of waiting, but Eddie still doesn't know when the target will show up. Once the call is over, the Killer drops the phone and steps on it to destroy it. In the evening, the Killer is getting his sniper rifle ready when he hears a noise in the corridor. A man approaches the door and the Killer is in position to shoot, but it's just the superintendent dropping the mail. After watching the hotel a little longer, the Killer brushes his teeth and makes sure to wash the sink to get rid of his DNA. Then he lies down on a table to sleep, and his watch alarm wakes him up every 10 minutes so he can keep an eye on the hotel. In the middle of the night, the Killer is relieved to discover that his target has finally entered the hotel room, so he gets his weapon ready and raises the table for support. He also plays music on his MP3 player, puts in eye drops, and keeps track of his pulse rate. In the hotel, a naughty worker is performing for the target. The Killer waits for the right moment to finally shoot, however the woman steps forward at the same time and the bullet ends up hitting her instead. He wants to shoot again but the security guards rush to close the curtains. Now the Killer has no choice but to grab all his things and leave the building. He gets on his scooter and rides away right before the police arrive. As he drives through the city, the Killer throws away his things in the sewer and the garbage truck. He can hear the police sirens getting closer, so he has to make a few sudden turns and drive down some stairs to escape successfully. Eventually he reaches the river, where he abandons his scooter and throws his helmet in the water. At a gas station, the Killer uses the bathroom to put on new clothes and shave. He makes sure to clean the place before taking a cab to the airport. Before going inside, he throws the last part of his weapon in a trash can. This is the first time he's failed a mission, so he's very nervous. When a police dog looks at him, he rushes to the bathroom to freshen up and calm down. Next he calls Eddie, who scolds him for his failure. The Killer ends up hanging up in the middle of the conversation and destroys this phone too. After showing the employees a fake ID with his ticket, he boards the plane. While waiting for takeoff, he notices a suspicious man sitting nearby. As soon as he lands at the next airport, the Killer buys another ticket under a new identity. He's shocked to discover that the suspicious man is here too, so he decides to postpone his flight to the next day. At a hotel, the Killer rents a room for the night and orders food. Then he puts a glass and a lid on the door as a trap for intruders. Lastly he grabs a knife and puts it on a table next to a reading chair where he spends the rest of the night. The next day he flies to the Dominican Republic and drives his jeep to his hideout in the middle of the jungle. At the fence, he's shocked to find footprints and cigarette butts. The Killer grabs his gun and jumps over the fence to run toward the house, finding more footprints on the way. There's loud music playing inside but nothing is out of place. After turning the music off, the Killer checks the kitchen and finds some knives on the floor next to a blood stain. He desperately keeps searching the house and discovers a broken mirror in the bathroom plus more blood stains on the wall. There's also a broken window with more blood on the glass. The Killer makes a call before leaving the house. Minutes later, he arrives at the hospital to check on his unconscious girlfriend Magdala. Her brother Marcus tells him that a male and a female assassin broke in to interrogate and torture Magdala. She fought back and managed to stab the man in the leg, then she escaped by running through the window. The assassins got away by taking a taxi. Marcus thinks that the assassins were looking for the Killer and tried to kill her because she was a witness. The Killer assures Marcus that this won't ever happen again. A few hours later a doctor informs the Killer that Magdala will be transported to a private hospital as he requested. He tries to leave a tip, but the doctor walks away. At that moment Magdala wakes up and immediately assures the Killer that she didn't tell the attackers anything. At home, the Killer digs in the garden to reveal a safe full of weapons. He packs them all with his fake IDs before getting on his jeep to drive around the city, looking for the taxi that Marcus described. After several hours of driving, he still hasn't found a single clue. In the evening he goes to the taxi company and threatens the manager in order to access the system. A quick search reveals that a man named Leo drove the assassins to his house. The Killer takes some money from a box and throws a few things around to make it look like a robbery, leaving the manager tied up on the floor. The next day, the Killer waits outside the taxi company until he sees Leo come out in his cab and follows him downtown. The Killer pretends to be a tourist and takes Leo's cab, pulling out his gun while telling him to keep driving. Leo gives him his wallet because he thinks this is a robbery, but the Killer asks him about the assassins. A terrified Leo admits that the duo looked like freaks but he drove them because he needed the money. He noticed that the guy's leg was bleeding but they didn't want to go to the hospital, so Leo dropped them off at the airport as they asked. The Killer makes Leo park in an abandoned area under the bridge and shoots him in the head. Afterward he flies to New Orleans, where he rents a van to drive to his storage unit. He gets more IDs and guns from a chest plus new license plates for the van. Then he goes to a hardware store to buy some tools. In the city, the Killer pretends to be a contract cleaner and enters a fancy building when they open the door for the mailman. They take the elevator together and on the upper floor, the Killer drinks water from a fountain to buy time. The mailman doesn't close the door properly, and once he leaves, the killer takes the chance to enter the office. Inside, Eddie's secretary Dolores is terrified to see him arrive with a gun in hand. The killer takes her computer and her phone before forcing her to guide him to his handler's office. Dolores ties Eddie to his chair before going to the bathroom and tying her arm to the sink. Then the killer closes the door and asks who the two assassins at his house were. Eddie explains he had to make a deal with a very powerful client to make up for the failed mission, but he never expected the killer to go home. The killer uses a nail gun to destroy Eddie's and Dolores' computers, but Eddie keeps telling him to leave and hide in another country. When the killer keeps asking for the identity of the assassins, Eddie refuses to talk, so he stabs him in the chest with 3 nails. Then the killer calls 911 and leaves the phone on the table. Eddie desperately tries to reach it, but he ends up falling instead, and the killer puts a newspaper under his head. After just a few seconds, Eddie dies. Then the killer checks on Dolores, who has had Eddie's medicine to stay calm. She's willing to give him the names he needs, but in return, she wants him to give her a non-suspicious death so her children can get the insurance money. The killer is supposed to ignore empathy to avoid having a weakness, but he frees her anyway. Dolores comes out of the bathroom only to pass out when she sees Eddie. The killer throws the body and the computers in a big trash bin and takes the elevator with Dolores. On the next floor, a tenant joins them and makes a joke about a body in the trash, making Dolores laugh out of nerves. Afterward, the killer drives Dolores to her house and leaves her tied in the van while he goes inside. Dolores screams and tries to free herself to no avail. The killer opens the garage and hides the van inside before he and Dolores go to her office. She teaches him how to use her address book, allowing him to find the mission cards with the information about the 2 assassins and the client who paid for the failed task. Then the killer breaks Dolores' neck and pushes her down the stairs to make it look like an accident. In the storage unit, the killer burns Eddie's body. Later, he takes the ferry and throws Eddie's ashes in the sea. After spending the night in a motel, the killer washes the van and puts on new license plates. For the next few hours, the killer drives until he arrives in Florida. He abandons the van and rents a car before driving to the house of the male assassin. The killer identifies his victim because he's limping. After getting some groceries, the killer waits in his car parked near the house. Eventually, the assassin and some friends come out of the house and leave in their truck. The killer immediately follows them. In the city, the truck stops outside a club and the group goes inside, so the killer goes back to the house and waits until his target returns. Once the guy is in the house, the killer approaches the fence and a crazy dog barks at him. He throws some food mixed with a sedative and she eats it without hesitation. At that moment, her owner calls her. After waiting a few minutes for the sedative to kick in, the killer crosses the gate and sneaks around the house. Nearby, the dog is snoring on her bed. The killer enters the house and starts searching the rooms one by one. Suddenly, he's tackled by the brute, who also manages to disarm him. The men fight each other, and in the chaos, the gun ends up under the bed. The brute throws the killer through the closet window, then he drops him on the floor to start beating him up. When the brute pulls away to go for the gun, the killer takes the chance to stand up and the brute immediately comes after him again. The fight continues and the killer is thrown at the TV, so he responds by breaking a vase on the brute's head. Then he runs to the next room and grabs various decorations to use as weapons, only for the brute to throw him in the hallway. The men keep exchanging blows and the killer jumps on the brute's back to start choking him. The brute moves back to hit the killer against the wall and falls back to smash him on the floor. Then the brute tackles him on top of the glass table and tries to beat him up again. However, the killer manages to grab a fire poker and uses it as a weapon, forcing the brute to step away. The killer follows him and hits him with the poker before jumping behind the couch, which the brute pushes to trap him. Now the killer is close enough to hit him in the leg and tackle him again, but the brute tosses him on another table. When the brute opens a drawer to pull out a gun, the killer hits him with the poker again and makes him fall on a table leg, which stabs him in the back. The brute shoots a few bullets, but the killer runs to hide in the kitchen, where he takes a grater. After removing the wood piece from his back, the brute approaches the kitchen. The killer throws the grater to make him shoot in the wrong direction and runs out of the room. Before he closes the door, the brute sees his face and recognizes him. Bleeding all over the floor, the brute crosses the door and tries to reach the bedroom. However, the killer has finally found his gun and shoots him down first. The noise awakens the dog, who runs into the house as the killer shoots the brute in the head to finally kill him. The killer starts running while the dog sniffs her owner, realizing he's dead. She chases after the killer, even jumping through a window to follow him outside. The killer crosses the fence and closes it right before the dog could reach him. Then he throws a Molotov bomb through a window to light the house on fire. At the airport, the killer takes a shower before boarding a plane to New York. There he rents another car and drives to the suburbs where the female assassin lives. After taking some medicine for his injuries, he spends the whole day waiting in his car. In the evening, the killer finally sees the expert come out of the house and immediately follows her to the city. At the stoplights, he considers shooting her, but he hears the police, so he puts his gun away. Eventually, the expert enters a restaurant, so the killer rushes inside too and sits at her table, quickly taking the gun from her purse. The expert instantly recognizes him and asks the waiter for a bottle of whiskey, wanting to spend her last moments with a good drink. She asks about Eddie and is happy to hear that he's dead. She also tries to share her food and drinks, but the killer won't touch them. The expert explains she has nothing against him or his girlfriend, she only took a job as all hitmen do. After sharing an old tale as a metaphor for their jobs, the expert wonders why the killer took such a risk and theorizes that he expected that seeing her would fill him with reassurance like the day he missed his shot. This causes the killer to finally drink, and the expert tells the waiters to take everything because they're done. Outside, the duo walks on the frozen park and the expert slips on the stairs. She asks for his help, but the killer shoots her in the head instead. A closer look reveals she had a knife and she slipped on purpose to try to trick him. Sometime later the killer arrives in Chicago and waits outside a very fancy building where the powerful man who paid for the failed mission lives. He sees him leave for the gym and looks for the address online. As soon as he sees an opening, the killer sneaks into the garage of the residential building. Unfortunately the doors are locked, so he takes a picture of the lock and buys some helpful tools on Amazon. Afterward he goes to the gym to sign up. While filling out the paperwork, he notices he needs a special key card to access certain areas. Next he goes to the bank and transfers all his money to his Dominican account under a fake name. In the evening, the killer buys a gun from the local dealer. The next morning the killer picks up his package and goes to the gym. He bumps into the janitor on purpose to clone his key card using the device he bought. In the locker room, he waits until everyone else is gone and uses the cloned key card to open his target's locker. He checks the wallet and finds another key card, which he clones as well. A few hours later, the killer sneaks into the garage just like last time, and this time he can access the residential area, thanks to the key card. Seconds later his target Clay is shocked to find him in his living room. Clay has no idea who he is, so the killer shows him the mission card. Once he understands, Clay explains that he doesn't hate the killer for failing the mission since mistakes happen. However, Eddie convinced him that the trail had to be scrubbed, and Clay didn't know what it meant when he paid. After some hesitation, the killer chooses to believe him, although he also drops a threat. If Clay ever targets him again or reveals his identity to anyone, the killer will come back to murder him. With those last words, he leaves. In the elevator, he destroys all the mission cards and later drops them on the street. Back in the Dominican Republic, the killer takes care of a recovering Magdala. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.